Thank you for that very kind offer, but Matthew and I would like to move our amended recommendations in terms of reference.
Can I just seek clarification? Is the implication of it, are these not?
The paper in front of you is not Matthew and my amended recommendations in terms of reference. So we ask that.
So where I'm up to procedurally is that I, with the seconder of Councillor Brand, moved my original resolutions. Then there was amendments that were made to it, and there's been some discussion quite constructively to then find a set of amendments that I think everybody can live with.
Respectfully, I moved amended recommendations. Matthew Benj seconded them, and we would like to take a vote on those. Amended recommendations, amended terms of reference. They've been sent through and circulated to the staff.
Yes, my question then.
Standing orders that we should be able to do that.
No, but my question is, at the time you moved your amendment, I asked for some clarification as to what that amendment was. Is the amendment that you wish to move now the piece of paper in front of us, Councillor Sansom?
No, I wish to move the amended recommendations in terms of reference as I sent through to staff. Which
but I made a ruling that they were out of order in that it had an or around Councillor.
We updated that. Robin has received the updated ones, which includes the and for the members, and it includes the wording that Alec requested around cost, the cost thing and the mitigation of risk.
So perhaps
here's where I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to the point where all the councillors know what we did. And so the reason for pausing was to get these two pieces of paper in front of everybody. So can I just check, are there any difficulties with the piece of paper that you have in front of you?
Pieces of paper in front of us are not our amended recommendations, and I would ask if we need clarification that those be printed and circulated.
Well, if that's the case, what I think we should do is ask staff to print and circulate those. I thought we'd got to a healthy consensus about the outcome. It now seems that you have a different set of amendments that I need to be able to manage a debate and a vote on.
Sure.
May I offer that what I have put in front of you in terms of the terms of reference reflects your comments, Councillor. I've just done it in a clean copy.
I know we know very well what these say, and we have sent through carefully worded amended recommendations, and we wish those to be put up so that everybody can see them and vote on them. Our recommendations, not Alec's recommendations.
Yeah, sure. What I'm going to do, just to make it manageable for our governance staff, is to get a printed copy of a document that both you and Aaron are comfortable with, have that circulated alongside, and then people can be quite clear about what the difference is. And on that basis, I'm going to move, just give the staff a fair time to get those pieces of paper around and move back into the agenda to item 6. Just while we get those bits of paper in front of us. So we'll get that. And I'm going to, if there are going to be different amendments to the ones that I thought had been agreed to, then we need to have our advisors back as well, so I understand them.
Yep.
So we'll deal with item 6. Item 6 on the agenda is the regional sewerage business unit.
Nick, respectfully, I'm like, this is, Matthew and I moved amended recommendations in terms of reference. They're available. Peter's going to be leaving the meeting any minute. I feel that it would be fair that we put the things up. We put mine and Matthew's recommendations up on the board. The staff have them. I don't see why they can't just be put up. It's the recommendations. The terms of reference are fine. It's the, well, actually, I don't know that, but
I'm just really determined. And what I thought we'd got to prior to lunch was an agreed position on the terms of reference in the resolution.
We did not. Me and Nick, you keep saying that it's your view this, your view that. I'm trying to be really clear and patient that Matthew and I sent through amended recommendations. We adapted those to include all the membership. We adapted those to include the words that the deputy, that the CE asked around cost and that kind of thing. It's
But
just
here's my problem,
that
Councillor Sansom.
our words are put up on the screen and we get as a democratic group of elected members to vote on them.
Councillor Sansom, I'm more than happy to have that process occur, but I want members to be absolutely clear on what they're voting on. And so what I
Let's
ask
get them on the
can you
board
stop?
so people can
You've
see.
asked me not to interrupt you, Councillor Sansom. I asked you to respect my role as chair and to let me try and manage the process, because I'm more than happy to have the vote. I'm just very keen to make sure we know what the different amendments are. Now, when I adjourned at lunchtime, I thought we'd come to an agreement on the terms of reference and the wording, asked the staff to make those changes as per the informal discussion we had at the top table, asked them to print them off and circulate them. You've now advised me that the document that has been circulated is not what you are comfortable with. And so what I wish to do is to have our officers distribute in paper version alongside this so that then councillors can be absolutely clear. And so they are being printed off. Now, while they're being printed off and distributed, I'm going to continue with other items on the agenda. And the moment those pieces of paper are available, I'll come back to it. So I'm going to, sorry?
They are on the screen. But I am getting copies printed off and I'm happy to follow that.
Yeah, and I want to, yeah, sure, hand them out. And the other thing is I want to know where they are different to where we got. And I want to be able to ask questions of officers as to what they mean.
But Nick, it's only all the changes are shown on here. We don't have to compare it with any other version. This is compared with the recommendations that were proposed in the agenda and so on. Isn't that the case? Why are we comparing it with another version that nobody's agreed on?
Well, I thought, and look, I just asked councillors for a little bit of tolerance. I'm genuinely tried and thought we had got to a consensus position. And if the position is different, then I do want to know from officers what the implications of those are. And I reserve the right to ask those questions of our officers so we know exactly what we're doing with those. And so when the pieces of paper are distributed, it will be my intention to move back to that item. We come to item 6 on the agenda with respect to the regional business unit, which is covered in the agenda. Is someone prepared to move the adoption of the Nelson Regional Sewerage Business Unit 2022 to 24 Activity Management Plan? Are members of that committee here?
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Pakipaki. Is there a seconder to that? Thank you. Is there any debate with respect to the Regional Business Unit's report and Activity Management Plan? That being the case, I shall put that. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, say no. We now come to the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit. Matthew, I think you are a member of that group.
No.
I'm sorry.
I'll move it.
Yeah,
Aaron will second it.
Moved Councillor Courtney, seconded Councillor Stallard. Is there any discussion on the adoption of the Activity Management Plan 2022 to 34? That being the case, I'll put that report. All those please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, carried. We come to the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit Annual Report. And that we receive. It's interesting. What's the difference between receiving the business unit's report and the other one that said adopt? Any significance in that?
The annual report is to be received, and the activity management plans, just like all our activity management plans, need to be adopted. This is a receive. Noting.
Moved.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Courtney, seconded.
Councillor Stallard.
Councillor Stallard's happy to second that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. We now come to item 6.3, which is the adoption of the commercial occupation policy and licence fee scheduled in resolutions 1 to 8. Happy to have, who would be the right officers to report on the panel's recommendations?
Sure.
Thank you both for your work, and can I also acknowledge the work of the hearings panel? If you'd just like to give us a summary before we consider the 8 resolutions.
Thank you, through the chair. So the resolutions there in front of council are the recommendations from the consultation panel. So council consulted on the proposed commercial occupation policy, proposed licence fee and proposed amendments to the urban environment bylaw. That went out for consultation. It was a special consultative procedure. So we had submissions and hearings and then deliberations by the panel, and what council has there in front of them now are the recommendations following that process.
Okay, any questions on the urban bylaw commercial occupation licence? Councillor Rollo.
As someone on the hearing panel, I'm happy to move it.
Sorry, I missed that. Councillor Rollo.
Right. I just said as someone who was on the hearing panel, I'm happy to move it.
Happy to move the adoption. Is there a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Pucky. I'll take Councillor Benj. Is there any debate?
Just a question.
Oh, let's do questions and then on for debate.
Sorry. Just one question, because I'm desperately trying to find it, is just, could you provide to us the recommended definition for occupy?
Through the chair, the recommended definition for occupy is, and I'm reading this from the bylaw document, occupy in clause 610 of this bylaw means unreasonably using a public place in a way that prevents or detrimentally affects use by others. It does not include an activity in a public space that is authorised by a commercial occupation licence or for which permission has been given under clause 6.3.
Councillor Stella, do you have a question of our staff, or did you want to make a contribution once we enter the debate?
It's a contribution, thank you.
There being no further questions, can I thank you both for your help? The resolutions and the adoption are now available for debate. Would the mover like to do the resolutions before us?
Given the hearing panel deliberations today, I debated it. I'll just wait for right to reply.
So in terms of reference. Other speakers? Floor is Councillor Stellars.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I just more to fill people in on where we ended up with some of these issues. We had that tricky clause around basically sleeping in the city centres after dark for no more than 2 hours or something like that. And we did receive submissions cautioning us about unreasonably infringing on people's rights under the Bill of Rights. So we did change that to prohibits occupying a public place in the way it prevents or detrimentally affects use by others. So it's no longer prohibited to simply be in a public space or to even fall asleep in a public space. We also dealt with, obviously, sandwich boards, and a couple of changes there. So we changed the definition or narrowed it to be rigid sandwich boards. So previously flags and banners were captured under that rule, but now they are no longer mentioned. So they are they are prohibited activity. During the hearing panel, I actually voted against. Well, no, I voted with that, but I opposed our stance on the sandwich boards because, to me, the starting point and the end point is that footpaths are a public space to enable safe movement of people. And I think any time we should enable and allow other activities on footpaths, but once they detract from that primary purpose, I think it becomes highly problematic, and I think that's where we're at now. So we're moving the sandwich boards from the building side to the road side of the footpaths, and to my mind, we are going from inconveniencing sort of potentially one group or set of people to another group or set of people. That's the risk, and we will find out to what degree we are inconveniencing people on the roadside once the law comes into force. But obviously with angle or parallel parking, each carries their problems. parallel parking. If you place the sandwich boards in the middle of the park, obviously your doors are open. If you place it in between parks, then that's where people come around and people carrying kids or young babies out of their car and trying to gain the footpath. So I thought it was very problematic, and my preference would be to not have sandwich boards, or even better, to be sort of tailor-made where we can identify safe zones and have them there and nowhere else. But anyway, that's where we're at. I'll certainly vote to support this, although I do oppose having those sandwich boards there.
Other contributions on the recommendations? The Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, very happy to speak in support and just want to acknowledge the great job of the consultation panel and landing these recommendations, I think, in really the right place. Certainly, when I debated putting this out for consultation, you've worked through my laundry list of minor to it's a scale of minor to slightly larger issues, and particularly the work you've done around the definition of occupy and just tidying that up. I think that this gets us in a much stronger place, and always recognising that when we are setting bylaws, that is one of the sort of strongest powers we have to influence how people can interact with our city, and it comes with a hefty weight around those Bill of Rights implications. And I've got to say, I didn't think our status quo or what we went out with had got that balance quite right. I think with that definition of occupy coming into it, that has strengthened those provisions a lot. And in regards to the sandwich board / flag discussion, I think that this is a practical way forward to provide us with a reasonable degree of amenity whilst also recognising the present conditions that we're dealing with. So, shot team, we'll get you to do a few more panels, I reckon.
Floor is Councillor Benj.
Thank you. Just to comment on the sandwich boards, I felt the blind and low vision were the people that had the biggest skin in this game, and it's their, as they said at the hearing here, their international rules say that they should be on the low side of the shore, and the high side of the shore is how they describe the footpath, should be clear for them. Now, I walked all the streets in Nelson and I drove around the rest of our city, other parts, and looked at what was going on. I couldn't believe the amount of sandwich boards and other fixed signs there were. And I've also walked up and down Richmond, who now has them all on the outside of their footpath. Richmond actually has a very clean line along their shop front. We don't. There are an incredible number of obstacles on the shop side. Now, I don't think we made the wrong decision, but I want to make the point that if blind and low vision people without the sandwich boards there, if they're going to bump into something, they'll bump into those other things. And that if we've simply removed one thing for them to bump into and they bump into the next thing, you know, what do we do then? So I just want to flag that, because if that starts happening, I don't know what we do about it. But Richmond yesterday, with all its sandwich boards on the outside, I must say, look, very cool. And I was only in Richmond because I came in here to get my photo taken, and the only place in here that does it was closed. So I have to go to Richmond.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I'll support this. Yesterday I popped into, I was looking at the activities in public places, and apparently you can get occupation for 2 or more continuous hours. You get permission somehow. Couldn't find it on the website, and I even popped in to the service desk to ask, and I even wonder if it exists. So I was wondering how you go about getting permission to occupy a public place for 2 or more continuous hours during the hours of darkness, I kind of think no one's ever going to apply for that and would never approve it anyway. So part of me wonders why these things even exist. And I am a little worried that, so I'm just wondering where rough sleepers are allowed to hang out. But I'm a little worried this is the kind of thing that we're going to kick in 2 or 3 weeks before the Buskers Festival or the Arts Festival to clean up the town. So I will support this, but I'm a little iffy.
Councillor Rowland.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, and my all good if I did my right to reply.
No, there may be other speakers. Just hold fire. Oh, the contribution that I would make is that I was happy for us to go out and publicly consult on the issue of the sandwich boards, but always felt that it was overreach for us to prohibit them. I think some of the submissions that the panel received from actually some of our really moderate, sensible, pretty proactive business people well made the case that they are an important advertising tool for our businesses, our retail businesses, in being able to both advertise their services but also make plain that they are open. I am going to support the resolution, but I do have to say I am uncomfortable with one element of where we have landed. And it is with respect to us effectively saying, well, here's the rules, but we're not going to apply them to ourselves. That is, and I know lots of businesses that I walk around town who have flags in the city to indicate their presence. And as a consequence of this bylaw, they will not be allowed to do so. Councillors will be aware that each Saturday we go to the market and we have our flag to indicate where the Nelson City Council stand is. I am not one of those that likes it when we say this rule applies to everybody else but not to us. And the bylaw that is being proposed exempts us from us so that we can effectively do as we wish. And that's the part of which does cause me some discomfort. I do acknowledge the work that both staff and the panel have put into it. I am pleased that we're not proceeding with the prohibition on sandwich boards. If we were in a big city like in New York, where the pedestrian space is continuously cramped, I can accept the argument that the primary purpose of the footpath should be for people walking in and out. What I don't accept is that for the vast bulk of the time, the pedestrians are not crowded on our streets, and that for that reason there is ample room for the responsible use of sandwich boards alongside pedestrians and other use in that space. Are there any other contributions? That being the case, I'll allow Councillor Rollo to exercise his right of reply.
Well, thanks, Mayor Nick, and appreciate the feedback that's come from everyone. I will keep it brief. Appreciate the work with Councillor Stallard and Councillor Benj on the hearing panel. I don't think it was a easy task getting 3 people to all agree on where a sandwich board should go at the end of the day, but 3 men made it work. So thanks for that, and a huge thanks to the staff, Michelle, and the wider team for getting this to where we've got it. I think, as I said on the day, part of this is we're trying to create an accessible city, and there was a real push there around what does an accessible city look like. Can you have sandwich boards? Can you not? And I think the solution we've come to is acceptable for everyone, but it all, at the end of the day, comes down to how you police the rules. And if you have rules in place, you police them. If you don't police them, there's no point in having rules. So it's over to the enforcement team now to be the sandwich board police, I guess. And we wish them the best of luck with that, but happy to move it. Thank you.
Moved and debated, and so I will now put those. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. That is carried. Can I just check that officers have now been able to distribute a document so that we can all be quite clear on the resolutions before us? I
So through the chair, I've handed out Councillor Sanson's version 3.
Councillor Brand, Benj.
Yep. Councillor Sanson and Councillor Benj's version 3. I did what I was asked to before lunch to do a clean copy. What I did is I took Sanson Benj's copies and I did a clean copy on the terms of reference. So barring any commas in it, that should be exactly the same. And then I put a clean resolution, and the only thing that still remains in there is item 6, but 6A is as was discussed at the screen here, and that was on the understanding that I thought there was going to be some discussion about those recommendations, but through yourself, Chair, if you're willing to take out 6, then I think I'm confident that what we've the Sanson Benj version 3 will reflect what Mark and I did.
So, Mark, would you just like to take a seat at the table? Have everybody got the correct pieces of paper in front of them now? So we know what we're doing. That's good. Can I just check a procedural question with Councillor Sanson? There are 2 options. One is for you to become the substantive mover of the report with the amendments, and that just be one motion with yourself and Councillor Benj. Or equally so, I'm quite comfortable to leave the resolution on the table from myself and Councillor Brand, and then to separately have the debate on the amendment. What's your preference? Because I'm perfectly relaxed.
My preference is that Matthew and I move the amended recommendations, or move and second, as we have done, the amended recommendations as we've proposed, and if they are to become substantive, that's fine. Is that the approach?
So the place where
so
the place
our
where
amended recommendations become the substantive. Is that correct?
No, that's fine. So, and can I just be clear? Does the amendment in the piece of paper I have in front of me of the original Mayor's report still has item 6 in it?
I mean, like, I'm not sure what you're looking at, but it's now up on the board, the correct one that's been circulated to all elected members, including yourself. So that is what we are moving as the substantive.
So what you're seeing on the screen is the Sanson Benj version 3. What I was also do is to do a clean copy of yours and theirs. That's since changed post lunch, but what you see up on the screen is the Sanson Benj version 3 for the resolutions. What I've handed out, which is what I said I would do before lunch, was to do a clean copy on the basis that that was going to be discussed further, and that includes the original 6. So
we are
if the
moving
6 is
and
taken out,
seconding.
it will reflect exactly what's on the screen.
So we're not asking for anything to be removed from the original ones. We are wanting to move the amended recommendations.
That's very helpful. The key part for me, which I was warranting to get the clarity on, is that the original resolutions that I had listed numbers 2 to 6 around establishing the working group stand and the amendments and the terms of reference as we have there. So I think we're in the right place.
The only thing that I do point out is that there's still the use of the words prioritising, and we agreed that we would say take into account, not prioritising. I think we agreed that.
That's fine. It's just what I'm. Can I just ask officers why there are 2 up there? Like, can we just have the ones that we're proposing to move, not the ones that we're not proposing to move? Because we have
moved and with seconded by Councillor Benj, the original motions, and what we've got is the amendments. And basically what I'm trying to do is to get absolutely clear as to when you put the 2 of them together, what is the end result. Now,
it's just one correction to that, which Alec was correct, is that it needs to say taking into account rather than prioritising. On 6, where the words it says prioritising biodiversity, it should say taking into account.
Realistic should be spelled correctly.
Yeah. And then we're happy with that, and we'd like to move it and move forwards because it's just been a little bit of a faff. unnecessarily, politely. It's not a criticism of anyone. This is as much Matthew Bend and I.
We're amending quite a lot of wording, but the words matter, and it's just taking a little time to get the words right for us to make it work. What I'd like to do, if councillors will please indulge me, I'm happy to take any questions from colleagues about now specifically what's on the table with respect to the original motion and the amendment that's been moved. Then we'll move into debate on the amendment. Then we'll move into debate on the substantive motion. The floor is Councillor Pakipakis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the little issue that we got into before with Councillor Brand and Hodgson, that
is resolved.
That is resolved. We're well past that, and that was just a distraction.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that was the only other change, and we say that there was once two.
Can I check? If the amendment is passed, does the original item in my report that the Forest Systems Manager will be funded from the forest account stand or not?
Through the chair, if the amendment is passed, it becomes a substantive motion. The original motion is lost. It is no longer on the table.
Yep.
And then the substantive motion is put.
No, look, I'm just trying to cut to the chase.
That's
I'm not worried about the procedure. I'm worried about what the outcome. If the amendment proposed by Councillor Sanson and Councillor Benge is passed, does that mean that my recommendation that the Forest System Manager be funded from the forest account is lost?
That's correct.
Is removed?
Yes.
Would the Chief Executive tell me how it will be funded if it's not going to be funded from there?
Well, I've always said that how it's funded is an operational matter, and that'll be up to the Chief Executive. So I think by not having that in, it's neither here nor there. We were just trying to clarify. I think we're okay.
It's a noting one, so it makes no difference, and I'm quite relaxed. Are there any other questions so that councillors then have clarity about the amendment and the original resolution? That being the case, we will end the question phase. We now move into the debating stage, and I need to move from the chair that we've gone beyond 3 p.m. and I need an extension of meeting time beyond 6 hours. Moved by the chair, seconded by Councillor Courtney. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Councillor Rainey is going to join us by Zoom. That requires my consent, and it does have my consent. And the floor is Councillor Sanson's for moving her amendment.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair, and thanks to everybody's patience while we got the amended recommendations and terms of reference up on the table and circulated. I will just speak a little bit to why we made these changes. I think initially we were concerned that 7 members seemed unusually large. It gives rise to a majority of the council. Gives rise to it being a majority of the council sitting around the working group, and that we thought there could be some risk to kind of democracy and fair outcomes if a larger, like basically a supermajority of elected members sitting on a working group or a task force agreed something, even though they'd have no rights to decide at the working group or task force level. Effectively, it is a decision. But I also understand that all of those elected members who expressed an interest are pretty keen to be there, and I feel comfortable that as a group of professional colleagues we can manage that conflict. The recommendation 6, this note is intended to clearly define the focus of the transition and the importance of the Forest Systems Manager having skills and background that match the intent of the transition, as clearly stated in the task force report. We felt that this was necessary given the LTP consultation document clearly states the outcome of the transition, and we feel that council needed to really kind of re-emphasise this intent, particularly around taking a strategic view across the whole 10,000 hectares, and that we are taking into account biodiversity, recreation and ecosystem health alongside the other key matters which we would all be taking into account normally. And that's really, those are the main changes. And I think to the terms of reference, really it was just kind of tidying them up, making sure that there is a degree of transparency, which we don't always see in some of the task forces and working groups. So, you know, that we're able to invite all the working group will be able to invite experts in, that other elected members and members of the public will be able to attend unless there is matters of commercial sensitivity. So, and we also listened to the feedback from Mayor Nick and Deputy CE Alec Levertis around the things that they wanted to see in there, and we've included those as well. So hopefully we've landed in a position that everybody can support. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. Any other comments? Councillor Bench.
Yeah, hopefully we've got there. I like the way we had worded number 6, because it put the regeneration of the existing forest not ahead of the other, but in writing it put it ahead of the other to recognise the fact that that is also part of this role as recommended by the task force. And Alec did change that into the other one, I see that, but whichever way it goes, I'm happy with this, and I hope that we can look forward to getting going.
Thank you. Any further discussion? That being the case, I'm sorry, Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. And look, thank you to everyone who has contributed to getting this governance oversight established. I think it is important, it's overdue, and it will hopefully, ensure that all the steps we take from now will have a very sound strategic, underlying strategic basis. I think one aspect we need to always keep in mind as we undergo this transition is the community. I know we've talked a lot about the task force members and ourselves and so on. There are very strong and clear community expectations about what we're doing and how we might go about it and what the outcome should be. I do have a couple of concerns, and I think we should give some thought as to how we're going to measure success with all of this. And there is an aspirational statement in the task force report. It's just a couple of lines, and I'm not sure if we even have an agreement on how we'll measure success, but I would like to think that we head towards the aspirational statement. A couple of concerns. We do risk, there is risk in this project. And I think that if we start to go down the path where we interpret the task force report as being, without any meaningful guidance, and that the wording is flexible and so on, we'll just end up with no direction. And we'll start making a series of ad hoc decisions that might potentially be inconsistent, and certainly some of them will be not meet community expectations, and that'll get us into some problems. I believe the report does in fact give meaningful guidance, and for that reason I believe we should make every effort not to deviate from that guidance, because again that will end up in a place with problems. So in terms of these amendments, the two, Councillor Sanson and Councillor Bench, who were our two representatives on that former task force, they have the most intimate knowledge of the workings on that task force and the intent, and they are making these recommendations. I think we should listen to them and support them and accept these recommendations before us.
Stella, are there any further contributions on the amendments? I'll allow the mover of the amendments to exercise your right of reply.
Thanks very much. And I think thanks, I guess a matter that Councillor Stallard raised, which reminded me, I think that this working group is overdue. For the last 9, 12, 15 years, we have had a governance structure that has directly overseen the forestry operations and forestry transition. So this term on council, whilst we did have the Right Tree, Right Place task force, which was kind of reviewing where we'd got to date and taking a kind of long-term future view, for the last 2 years of council, the 2 years of this term so far, we have not had governance oversight of council's forestry operations, and that is an anomaly. And I'm confident that this working group addresses that, and that we will both be able to ensure that the current operations as we transition out of commercial forestry has governance oversight, as well as our long-term strategic view and vision and aspirations for not just the front country, which is really accessible and is the way that most people will kind of connect with nature in our city is through those 600 hectares, which is on the front of the 10,000 hectares, but also that, as Morgan so clearly conveyed to us this morning, the real prize here is how we restore and regenerate those 10,000 hectares and ensure that they thrive as well. So, yeah, thanks everyone.
I'll put the amendment. Those that are in favour, please say aye.
Can I just ask, sorry, can we just have a personal vote? Just, you don't think we need to?
I think unless we're actually trying to be divided, I'm trying with every bone in my body to try and stop this issue doing to this council what it did to the last council.
I mean, that respectfully, sometimes a personal vote is just about showing that everybody around the table supports something. So it's not about division, it's about kotahitanga and unity. So in the spirit of kotahitanga and unity, I'm asking for a personal vote, please.
I am at the end of my wits. If the member insists on there being a personal vote, I'll ask the Chief Executive to conduct a personal vote.
Councillor Anderson?
Aye.
Councillor Benge?
Aye.
Councillor Brand?
Aye.
Councillor Courtney?
Aye.
Councillor Hodgson?
Aye.
Councillor Pakipaki?
Total court.
Councillor Rainey?
Aye. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Rollo?
Aye.
Councillor Sampson?
Aye.
Councillor Skinner? Oh, sorry, apologies. Councillor Stallard?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor O'Neill
Aye.
Stevens? His Worship the Mayor?
Aye.
That's a unanimous.
We now come to the substantive motion. And as the mover of it, let me give some background. No issue caused as much difficulty for the previous council as this issue of forestry. And I made a decision at the beginning of this term to try and avoid it wrecking this council in the way in which it did the last, by establishing and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a task force report independently chaired by the very respected former Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. That's been a big investment by ratepayers, but it has been an investment not only in trying to get the right answer for the future of our forests, but also in terms of trying to avoid this issue causing the level of division that it did in the previous council. Over the last 6 weeks, as some members have chosen to criticise council staff, I will have spent more than half my time trying to keep a lid on the tensions that exist around this transition. And if I sound a little frustrated, I am. The most telling piece for me in this morning's proceedings is that when Dr. Morgan Williams was directly asked the question as to whether the actions that had been taken by staff were consistent with the recommendations of the task force, he made plain that they were. Now, the really difficult part of this question is I think there's a very broad consensus around the really big stuff. I don't think the council should be in the business of commercial forestry. And in that point, I strongly agree. The second point that is a very significant change, and I think is the most valuable pearl of wisdom from the task force, is that what the council does with its 10,000 hectares of native forest in terms of biodiversity benefit is actually far more significant than all the energy and debate that's gone into the 600 hectares of a previous commercial forest. And so these really important recommendations in the report of developing a strategic plan for our complete forests, for council employing a systems forestry manager that's going to look over all of that asset, I am very comfortable with. I do not think this council can walk away from some of the really tough questions. And it's this. We could spend millions and millions, tens of millions, on insisting that all of that 600 hectares be planted in natives. That is not what was recommended by the task force. And significantly, it contradicts the very point, and that was that the biggest biodiversity benefits are in improving the management of the large amount of native forests that we hold. We have no mandate from the ratepayer, from the long-term plan, to spend the tens of millions of dollars if the working group insists on it all being returned into native forest. And it would also miss a further very significant point. If there is any responsibility that there is around this council table, is to ensure that we do a good job of managing the essential services. And one of the most frightening aspects of the August 22 storm was when the main pipeline from the Maitai Dam to service the city was bowled out by a landslide coming from this very forest area. And we as a council need to be very focused on that issue of landslide risk and making sure that we are making robust, sound decisions in protecting that essential infrastructure for our city. The reality is that in terms of planting a species not necessarily native on that very steep country, is that those forests will establish far more quickly and will do a better job of stabilising those areas and protecting that essential infrastructure for our city. The last point I'd make is that I will be very firm in respect of this Forestry Transition Working Group to ensure, as the terms of reference provides, that it sticks to the role of governance. In my view, the most important role for this working group is to deliver on two key recommendations: the delivery of a transition forestry plan and a strategic forest plan for our forest estate. That work is our core business as governors. But when it comes to the issues of employing staff, when it comes to the issues of deciding what contractors will do what work, what planting density will be used, then I have to say, as chair of this working group, is that I will be finding a clear line between what is properly governance and management. And the reason I do that is that if this large organisation that employs hundreds of people is going to be able to effectively do that job, this council collectively does need to understand that separation between governance and management. On that basis, I move the amended resolutions.
Are other people allowed to debate or not?
Yes, indeed. We've got an amended resolution. I have now exercised my right as the mover of the amended resolution.
Just checking that I
Other speakers?
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor Nick. I think we need to be really important. It's really important when we consider this matter that we are taking a long-term strategic view. And where some might say it's too expensive to reforest some areas in natives, we also need to think about the opportunities in doing native reforestation. There are opportunities for biodiversity credits coming down the pipeline. There are opportunities for voluntary carbon credits, which, if it's for native bush, are potentially of a higher value. There are opportunities for partnership for national and international philanthropic funding that may actually help us with some of this reforestation. By choosing the least cost option of doing a monoculture exotic, each time we are looking to replant an area, we actually just close the door on all of those opportunities. And whilst in the short term, that may seem like the best option because of, risk mitigation due to erosion, which is valid. We also need to keep in mind that there are many ways to address these risks, and we can do mixed species plantings. I'm comfortable that this working group will take a high level governance view across the strategic opportunities and the costs and the risks, and that we will support staff to deliver forestry transition that meet the aspirations of the community. But I think we need to be really careful about just kind of saying we're going to choose the least cost option every time, because I'm not sure that in the long run that is actually in the best interests of the community from a financial perspective or from an outcomes perspective. Because I discovered in the last term that actually, whilst we'd deregistered from the emissions trading scheme, if we re-registered our forest into the emissions trading scheme, we would probably have been making about as much per annum as we were from net profit from the forestry. So, there's always a bigger picture to consider. Thanks.
Other contributions? The Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, I'll keep these contributions brief. I think at the heart of this is, as the saying goes, there's more than one way to skin a cat. But unlike skinning a cat, this doesn't necessarily have to be deeply unpleasant. I can't say from personal experience. That just felt weirdly like I had seen something in my
Cat
time.
bylaws further down the agenda.
Yeah, we'll get to skinning cats. Look, I think ultimately we're in a really good place here. We're getting a task force with, I have to say, a majority of people that I trust, that being a majority of council. And the rest of us will hang out and do something else now. But we've got a group that is now going to be able to delve into what are really challenging decisions and those balances between and shaping where and what we plant, getting the right tree in the right place. I mean, it's clearly challenging. It took Right Tree, Right Place Task Force a long time to work through just to get high level recommendations. We're now going to need to do some more detailed work, and there will be trade-offs. There always are, and it will always depend on the time span on which you evaluate those decisions over. And I think that taking a long-term view is going to be crucial, but I have the trust that the group we're setting up will point us in the right direction, and that me and Mel and the other six of us, we can come along and cheerlead your wonderful decision making.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is great. It's a little scratchy getting there, but it's worth it. I think it's right and proper that Councillor Sanson and Bench well involved in recommendations. I understand the staff bruised. It just, to me, it looked funny. The first throw of the dice, we don't do native, and if we'd known a bit more, I'm sure quite possibly we would have landed in the same place if you said, look, we got a heap of cheap trees and we're in a rush. I think having this task force will actually protect staff if we're informed and we can go out and defend these decisions rather than have things that kind of get thrown a little bit and we don't know why and how and seem to go. And if they upset and offended two councillors that were on the task force, then maybe we need this working group to ensure that what the thoughts are around the right tree, right place document and I'm sure that Dr. Williams is really nice. I liked him. He had a lot of mana, so I think it's a great document, and I think if we all stick to it, I can't see there being that many issues. So I'm positive. I'm optimistic. I believe in all it's going to take is good relationships, and I think we have intent. We have a wonderful document with all people that care, and I'd like to think that the staff will be protected just by having these group of people there supporting.
Well, thanks, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Stella, then Councillor Bench.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, look, it's going to be great to continue on this work to implement the recommendations of the task order. And I especially think the structural recommendations are so important. So we are going to appoint a senior level forest systems leadership role that report directly to the chief executive. That's recommendation 2. And remember, these are in order of importance or order of when you implement them. And number 4 is the future governance and management of the forest land should include an independent community entity to maintain tangata whenua, intergenerational input and so on. I really hope we move in that direction as well and get that set up. And that'll give us, I think, a really good chance of succeeding with this transition. I agree, me and Nick, and with Morgan when they say, in terms of biodiversity, we're going to get the best bang for our buck by looking at the whole 10,000 hectares. Absolutely. As well as that, we shouldn't forget that in terms of the people of this region, where they are going to interface with the transition is going to be the 600 closest hectares, not the 600 furthest hectares. So whether you're talking about recreation or the visual backdrop to the city or connecting with nature or even perhaps a wider halo for the sanctuary and so on and so on and so on, that's all the closest 600 hectares. We must take real care with what we do there. That's where we'll either have great community support and engagement or where things might be a bit difficult. So really happy we're at this stage and that we can get on with the work. So thanks everyone. It's been difficult. Let's get on with it.
Thanks, Councillor Stella. Councillor Bench, and followed by Councillor Pakipa.
Thank you. This is a fantastic project. And I think it will be by far the biggest in New Zealand. I'm not hung up on natives. I am hung up that it should be mixed species and they should be appropriate for the site. As to the cost, we had a very experienced forester on the team, and he believed that the cutting and sale of the trees, it was possible for that to cover the cost of transitioning if done cleverly. And I think that's what we have to do. We need innovation. We don't just have to blindly do whatever we're told. There are lots of things that we need to consider. Some of them may be stupid, some of them may not. But I think there's a lot of options that need to be carefully looked at before we go down this track. 2 days ago, I walked block 405, 407 and 411 with a trenching shovel. And it's very variable, and I'm afraid I don't share your confidence. I'm worried that if we have a dry summer, we're actually going to be totally reliant on the climate for success. If we have a dry summer, I think they'll die. There are some very deep soils there, and there are some virtually no soils there. And if they do survive, New Zealand is a very different country to Australia or Africa or the Americas in that it's really young and our soil structure is completely different. The grain size is different. And we will all be dead, but we could be planting some huge projectiles above our water system. And that really worries me. The native trees there wouldn't have been large, except in, Victor's not there now, one of those gullies. And they're a different shape. They don't fall over and shoot down the hill. So I'm glad this group is set up, and I look forward to looking through all the options that are in front of us to make this transition a success.
Thanks, Councillor Benge. Councillor Pakipaki.
Hi, complete. I'll try to be real quick with this one. My grandfather planted trees. My father planted trees. He went to the forestry school in Golden Downs and was all of my family, my uncles, they all planted trees. They all harvested them. They were I grew up as a forestry family. Our family is known in the region as being one of the more significant contractors that relied upon it. But I'm finding myself that I'm really excited now to see a different pathway forward than what I grew up with was really centred around the whole idea with any spare land needed to be turned into Pinus radiata. That was really the only option that was discussed in my house growing up. So it is quite exciting to be in a space here and also to be a part of this working group and looking at what we can do in and close and around in the places where people live. The people on the East Coast, we have seen the detrimental effects of having commercial forests and also that sort of cycle in and around our coastal areas and our waterways. In particular, Nelson is very vulnerable with the river that runs through our city. So a careful management of that and being part of that is quite, I find that quite appealing and quite exciting. So I'm positive, and I think that there are a lot of things that the level of expertise that can be brought to the table, maybe not necessarily by us, but from the people who are involved. I think we are going to be able to heal the wound that has this old injury of reliance on forestry has caused to us in and around. And I believe that council should not be in the business of commercial forestry. Simple as that. So, kia ora.
Any further contributions? Just exercising my right of reply. I do want to acknowledge Mark McFarlane, who's been leading this work. As mayor, sometimes when issues become quite hotly contested, I, as mayor, end up digging down into the detail. And I have to say that as I have dug into the detail of this issue, this council is very fortunate to have the work of Mark. I think you've gone about your duties professionally and responsibly, and I personally wish to acknowledge that as mayor. I also want to acknowledge last week I had dinner with the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, the current one, Simon Upton. And he expressed to me that if there was any area around this issue of which there is huge uncertainty, which is reflected in the Right Tree, Right Place Task Force, is actually everybody's struggling to get hard numbers on what the relative costs are of replanting areas in native. His advice to me, though, was that it is expensive and that in many of the cases that will be highlighted is a lot more expensive than what people think. If I have a concern going forward is that, yes, there'll be lots of community organisations that will be very keen for all of the 600 hectares to be in natives. But this council needs to equally balance out that we have a community and ratepayers under incredible pressure, and that if we are going to make a decision to spend 25 or more $1 million on it, we need to be absolutely transparent with our community that those decisions come with cost. And just as a matter of note, around the issue of landslip risk, this is for real, and that we need to make very careful and responsible decisions with the very best of technical expertise around how we manage those risks. My PhD thesis was on the very issue of the interaction between forests and whether the way in which they trigger landslides, in that case the Abbotsford landslide, and in my view, particularly when we're dealing with council's key infrastructure, having a strong risk focus around the protection of that infrastructure is going to be absolutely key to getting it right. The last point I'd make is that this is an issue that is going to be a bit of a rolling maul or adaptive management. all of what I have seen over the issue comes to the view that you're not going to come to a single solution. We are going to do plantings just as we have with the redwoods and with others natives that we've got substantive hectares going in next year. And as we get better information about the costs, then we're going to be able to properly manage this transition. And given that it is a transition that is likely to last for a good 25 years over the cycle of the Pinus radiata that the council currently has, it's an issue that will need review as that information comes through. And as I said, will require adaptive management. On that note, I shall now put the resolutions in my mayor's report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no.
Aye.
You got in there, Pete? Thank you.
Yeah.
Get on your flight, mate. Okay, we now turn, in my view, to item 9 on the agenda, which is the amendment to the policy on development.
Excuse me, Nick.
Yeah.
I see an item here that I wish to speak to, and that's item 3.2 on your agenda. And it's headed the most significant announcement at the local government conference.
Oh, look, I'm sorry. And can I just check with my colleagues from the governance team? And that is, we have now passed the resolutions on the forestry transition as amended. We've passed the amendments with respect to the issues of the sister cities. I thought I had taken item 1.
You had.
Item 1 is included in.
No, so taken separately. Yep.
I'm sure I had taken it.
Yes,
I have.
Yes, you have.
So, look, my apologies, Councillor Courtney. When I put item 1 from my mayor's report, I did say that it covered the issues from the local government conference, but I'm also one of those that, with the way in which it's been somewhat of a pickled agenda today, for good reason, I'm more than happy if council are in agreement, if anybody wishes to raise any other items from my mayor's report before I move on. Is there any objection to that course of action? That being the case, I'm happy to take further questions or comments on the other matters not covered either by forestry or sister cities in the mayor's report.
Can I speak?
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. This one really concerns me. The coalition government moving away from the well-beings, and they are pretty significant. Economic, social / heritage, environmental, and there's one more, isn't there? Well, those are the 4 of them. Cultural, yes, that's right. So we've got cultural, social, economic, heritage, and environmental. Now, this is an example of central government, Mayor Nick, introducing these quite caring, I would suggest, policies in 2002. And here we are 22 years later. It's been on again, off again. One government comes in and has it for about 7 years, and the next government comes in and takes it away, and the next government comes in and reintroduces them again. And it closes up to 22 years. So 10 years period, 7 years period, off again, on again. Now, these policies are impacting people's lives, and they're treating them in such a cavalier way that it really does distress me, because it's going to be the people at the bottom of the run, those that are really struggling, that are going to be impacted, in my judgment and from experience, are going to be impacted most of all. Now, you can talk about making and having the best infrastructure in the world, well, in the city and in the country, if you like, and we've got $2.3 billion of it. Yes, they are assets, but our greatest asset are our people and their welfare and their well-being. And I want to know, and I genuinely want to know, what is going to be the cost to the people of this community with taking these away? What is going to be the cost to our officers, council officers that have implemented these and proudly over a number of years? what impact that's going to be. So there's a whole raft of different things that need to be answered, and we just can't pass it over. I'm not prepared to accept that. These are the people on the lowest run that we're gathering up and supporting with a lot of these policies around these particular topics. So, Mayor Nick, what will the withdrawal of these mean for the well-being of the people of Nelson? Who are the biggest losers? Who will be the biggest losers from these government moves? How will it impact the incredible officers that have implemented these policies over nearly a couple of decades, probably? These off-again, on-again policies. What will be the impact? What will be the human cost? That's what I really want to know in respect of these well-being policies that are being taken away.
Happy
Here's
to
my
answer.
contribution.
Yeah, happy to answer Councillor Courtney's questions. And in answering the question of the impact, what is very clear is if you look at average rate increases across New Zealand, in the periods that you rightly point out that the well-beings were put in 2002, taken out in 2012, put back in 2019, and now the government is proposing to remove them in 2025. What you'll note is in those years when they were in, that rate increases were substantially larger. And I invite people to look at that track record. Now,
as part of the report, I would like some sort of paper on it. It needs to be analysed, and I would like justification. I'd like those figures.
Yeah, happy to share those.
Roll them off, but this is people we're talking about, not figures.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry, people pay rates, and people out there are hurting.
Yeah, some don't because they can't afford to.
Indeed. And that is the nature of the discussion. You'll note that in the report, I made 2 points, and that was that I'll be keenly interested in the legal drafting of what replaces the well-beings. And then I went on and said, I appreciate that there will be a range of views around the council table on this issue, and expect that when we submit on this bill, we will need to acknowledge those different perspectives. Because I think there will be different views around this council table. I know myself and the Deputy Mayor probably have different views. I think it would be premature to have a discussion today. No bill has been introduced. I think what my plan would be when we have a bill introduced, would be for us to have a workshop, for us to ask officers to provide for a report exactly of the sort that the Councillor Courtney has asked for, and that it would be my expectation for us then to produce a submission to that select committee. And simply because I know well the different views on this issue, I'm flagging already that I expect that submission will openly submit to Parliament a view that there are different perspectives around the table on that important question. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I was kind of grateful nobody had bitten, but now that Mel has, I've got to have a little bite, which is just to say I do think one of the really significant announcements that isn't fully touched on here is actually the suggestion that Cabinet would be looking at introducing expenditure limits for councils on what they deem as non-essentials. And I think that is a really concerning trend. My only other reflection, I do share Councillor Courtney's passion on this, is, as Mayor Nick rightfully points out, that local government rates take accounts for 2% of GDP. My comforting news is that in 1993, local government rates take was 2% of GDP. And it's fluctuated by approximately 0.1% up and down through that time in terms of operating expenditure. In 1993, we've had a major blowout. In 1993, we're at 3.5% of GDP. We're now at 3.6. So tighten your belts, everyone, or the government's going to do it for us. Get that 0.1% off the table and maybe we'll survive. But I'd share Nick's view that there's a time we're going to obviously need to submit what is a significant change. I guess my only reflection was in doing a brief bit of polling at the LGNZ conference of the number of elected members who had read the purpose of the Local Government Act, the number was not very high.
We're all going to studiously go home and get to that section of the Act. Can I just do from my report, seriously draw councillors' attention to page 47 of the agenda and my report. It sets out the 12 areas of which the government is expecting to make change. And there is actually quite a lot of beefy stuff in there, well beyond just the purpose clause. And as we expect to see from this government, the stuff rolling out, both council officers and elected members will need to keep a close eye on those elements of quite significant change. We've gone off script a little. I would now like to, because we actually have concluded the Mayor's report, I would now like to do, as I indicated earlier, move to item 9 on the agenda, which is the amendment to the policy of development contributions. Although I do acknowledge I've been going for an hour and 3/4, I'm going to suggest just before we start that we have a 5-minute at 40, exactly 5 minutes. different views around the gambling policy. So I really do want to take the time for that. And so, look, while it is my intention to try and move the agenda on, where there are differences, want to make sure we do it well. So let's progress. The item is item 9, which is the amendment to the policy on development contributions. Welcome our team to explain the paper on page 98.
Tēnā koutou, ina hoi wha. I'll take the report as read. Happy to answer any questions.
Happy to move.
Oh, this is efficiency. I love it. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Breen. This is with respect to the changes in the development contribution that have been well discussed. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, I think it might be useful just to bring up the question that I raised and which was well answered by the staff.
Yep.
Which was that I did ask if the wording or developments that deliver a similar housing outcome kind of left the door open for anybody who was doing multiple unit housing developments to basically apply for a development contribution waiver, in which case the staff responded. Do you want to give us the answer? It was really good.
Thank you. Through the chair. The tricky thing here is to amend without triggering our significance and engagement policies. So there's a clause in section 7.1 that has existed ever since we've had a development contributions policy that makes room for any partnership that the council enters into to deliver social housing. To maintain and give power to that while also exempting community housing providers and CHIPs, I made the recommendation that we just say either you're a CHIP or you're delivering something in the spirit of what a CHIP would be delivering, community housing provider, and then to name that only entities named in 7.1 would be exempt for social housing. So it's in the definition, it says this type of activity refer to section 7.1 for you to see if you apply for that exemption.
Okay, no further questions. The resolution's been moved and seconded. Is there anybody wanting to debate it? That being the case, I shall put it. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried. We come to item 10, which is with respect to the compliance strategy through to 2020. And welcome Chris and Michelle.
Oh, that'll be Chris and Mandy.
I think I've got on my agenda.
Happy to
You
take that
changed
as
name on me, Mandy.
Yes, yeah, but
yeah. Well, happy to take that report as read as well to speed things up for you guys.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Are there any? He breaks the record. You have to feel for council staff because sometimes they can be there for an hour and we're down into the micro detail, and other times we take it as read. But I'm not going to stand in the way of that, particularly today. Are there any questions on the compliance strategy? The Deputy Mayor.
Just two questions from me. With the removal of it as a performance measure from the LTP, does staff have a view as to how regularly it should be reviewed? It says as needed. Is there sort of an indicative sense of how regularly that is required?
So yes, thank you for that question or clarification. So the KPI, well, the performance measure at the moment measures the effectiveness of the strategy. It will be taken out and therefore the strategy itself will be reviewed by governance, which is probably more appropriate because otherwise you get a very management style report. So the aim is to start the review process next year and probably akin to bylaws come back within 5 years after that or earlier if needed.
And then just looking through the high level note of where enforcement has been, most of them are very consistent. The interesting one is under the freedom camping bylaw, you have sort of this most recent year and I think the year, skip 1 year, the year before that, with a sort of dramatic drops in the level of enforcement. Any commentary to that?
Yes, thank you for the chair. So we our enforcement of the bylaws, when it first came in, we funded that with patrols in the evening and in the morning. But then in subsequent years, that funding was cut. We did have some year, 1 year as a blip in there is where we got funding from central government to do the enforcement. So that's why there's a change.
And in terms of our current enforcement methodology there, is it just when reported now, or?
Yes, through the chair, it is a complaint basis rather than a regular patrols.
Thank you.
Councillor Starr.
Thanks, Minik. This item did fry my mind a wee bit. When I think of assessing compliance and then assessing the effectiveness of the compliance strategy, are they really two different things, or are they the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to measure. So, yeah, this is consistent with how it's been measured for effectiveness in previous years.
I guess leading on from that, do we measure compliance separately from measuring the effectiveness of the compliance strategy? Because that's, if we're measuring one, are we actually measuring both?
Yeah, through the chair, we do monitor how our compliance efforts are going to make sure that we're putting the resource in the right places. Yeah, so we do that anyway. But we also, yeah, but looking at that strategy, making sure that the overarching strategy enables us to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions? Is there a colleague that's prepared to move the recommendations of receiving the report and noting the long-term performance plan? Moved Councillor Sanson, seconded Councillor Courtney. Is there any debate? That being the case, I'll put the two resolutions. Those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, say no. We move to item 11, and I invite Richard before council. Can I just give notice that in informal discussions with colleagues, it is my intention to recommend that Councillor Henderson chair the panel in item 7, and that the other two members of the panel would be Councillor Benge and Councillor Sanson. I'm quite open to it being larger if necessary, but generally with these panels, that feels about the right size. I'd also note and have been hugely encouraged by the pre-consultation that has indicated quite a high level of public support for the work that's going on in this area. So we can discuss that as we move on. We're in your hands, Richard, to cover us through the report.
Thank you, Mayor Nat, and kia ora, councillors. Essentially, what I just wanted to note that as a result of a question from one of the councillors, we are suggesting an amendment to the statement of proposal. Essentially, it's taking out on pages 124 to 126 of your agenda, removing the options table there and putting in a summary of 5.10 in my report. It's really just to avoid confusion, especially and to make it more readily understood by the community. We just want to put a summary paragraph in there about the sort of options and alternatives that the council has considered without going into a lot of detail that's in those tables. So we are recommending that be amended. Apart from that, what I provided is essentially a statement of proposal to go out for formal consultation following previous discussions in the workshop that councillors had around introducing a new bylaw around cat management measures. It very much is in line with Tasman District Council's bylaw. Their submissions on theirs have just closed, and they'll be having hearings later this month and hope to have their bylaw in place, I think adopted in November. We're recommending a just slightly later time frame. You'll see the dates for hearings of submissions and deliberations, and the plan is to bring a bylaw to the December meeting of council for adoption. Essentially open to questions.
I note there's been a few questions that came in writing, and I was fascinated to see some of the responses on the detail, but it looks a pretty good piece of work. Happy to take questions from colleagues. Councillor Sanson.
Can I just foreshadow that I'd really like to move this if it's possible, but
sure, that's appreciated. Any further questions? That being the case, Richard, thank you for your ongoing work in this area. Good that we're working as closely as possible with Tasman. Best wishes to Matty in chairing the task force. Don't take any notice of the ribbing that colleagues give you about being in charge of pussycats. And on that note, I'll take the motion from Councillor Sanson, thank you officers, from Councillor Sanson to move the 7 resolutions and seek a second. Matty, would you be prepared to second? So the motion's been moved and seconded for resolutions 1 to 7. Any debate? Would the Councillor Santon like the floor, followed by the Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. I think the first thing I would really like to say is to express my deep appreciation to the staff for all their work on this. It's been years in the making, and I understand that establishing a bylaw for this kind of thing is quite a lot of work. It seems onerous, and you know, it just seems surprising sometimes that we can't identify an issue of this nature and have a simple fix. And I just really want to thank them for their tolerance and the time they've taken to explain options to us, and the fact that they've been working so closely with TDC staff and elected members. I feel like this is just, you know, like a game changer for biodiversity and obviously companion cat health as well, but, you know, biodiversity outcomes across the region. So I feel really excited to hear from the community and hope that they will support the bylaw. And then I look forward to sitting very unexcitedly at the hearing and hearing all views and taking that on board. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. The floor is the Deputy Mayor's.
Yeah, look, echo those comments from Councillor Sanson, but really I just want to highlight, I think this is actually, I want to give full credit to staff because I think the process to get to this point has really been exemplary. That pre-engagement material has, one, I think already created a level of understanding and comfort within the community, but also I think gives us strong confidence that this is something that is wanted, where we already knew that it was needed. And I know that these are significant beasts to get through, especially new bylaws. So thank you for your dedicated work so far and throughout the rest of this process. This is ultimately, I think, a really good and exciting step to take. Look forward to hearing from the panel that'll hear from the public on what the public has to say with this, but I'm confident that this will be something that we can hang our hats up on as having improved biodiversity outcomes in our region by giving us the tools to manage beloved pets, which then gives us the tools to deal with less beloved pests.
Councillor Stella.
Yeah, just procedural. Do we need to register in the recommendations somewhere that the statement of proposal will be amended from that included in the agenda?
Look, that's a question I really need to give to officers. The resolutions that council has
it's in there. Yeah, that's fine.
Is amended, so we've got that covered. Well done. It's good. Look, the simple comment that I would add is that I think cats' impact on biodiversity has long been underestimated in New Zealand. Cats are much beloved pets. Navigating this road between what are reasonable restrictions and rules in a bylaw, while at the same time being respectful of the companion pet that Ket plays is not without difficulty. This is another significant step along the road, and I totally concur with the comments of the Deputy Mayor. And actually, it's been one of those examples where there's been really good pre-engagement and process that gives me confidence that we're going to be able to land in a successful place. Councillor Bench.
Thank you. I think the general public, the time has come for this. A poll done in TDC showed that around 80% of cats are already microchipped and desexed. So, you know, in some ways the public have beaten us to it. They're already doing it. You can't say they aren't a danger to our wildlife. There's no question about that. And when you add to that all the money that is spent on trapping and trapping and trapping and trapping, and then we do nothing about cats, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We have Rue Collins telling us that there's an unusual number of cats on the outside of the fence up there, and of course they're just waiting to be fed because we're breeding the food on the other side of the fence.
That's right.
And the birds don't know about that. I think it's mycoplasmosis. Have I got that right?
Toxoplasmosis.
Toxoplasmosis. It's probably a disease a lot of you have never heard about, but it's not an uncommon disease, but it's mainly amongst farmers from wild cats. And it is a serious disease. And just on a lighter note, I used to take animals into old people's homes and schools and so forth, and that's now not allowed because of toxoplasmosis. And, you know, the lady who fed the eels since 1914, her dying wish on her deathbed, and she died a couple of days later, was to see a yak. And I said, they rung me up and I said, you mean a llama? They said, no, a yak. So I took her a yak and she took one look at it. I walked it into the whatever you call it, and she said, that's not a yak. And I said, I told you she wanted a llama. And she was the brightest they'd seen her in a month. She sat there and stroked the llama. I sat beside her with my arm around her because she was going to fall over. And she was just mesmerised. And when I was told by my daughter, who still does this, that she's no longer allowed to take them in for toxoplasmosis, I think of old Maggie McCullum and the joy that brief 30 minutes brought at the end of her life. So there you go. This I think will get support. I don't think it will be the shit fight that it would normally be.
Lots of technical terms there. Does the mover wish to exercise her right of reply?
No, I don't. Just thanks again. And also, Mayor Nick, thanks for your support of this. I feel like you've also been a champion, and that's just, I think we really acknowledge that and appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll put the resolutions. That's 1 to 8 with respect to the proposal for a draft cat management bylaw. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried, and acknowledge again the good work, and good luck with the next stage with yourself, Matty, and the panel. We come to item 12, the Memorandum of Understanding with the Nelson School of Music, and I invite Martin to report to us on this document.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I take the report as read. Happy to answer any questions.
My only regret is that our greatest fan of the School of Music, Councillor Rainey, is not with us. Any questions? Just to understand the framework around it, do we have MOUs with our other key cultural institutions like of SUTA, Museum, Theatre Royal, and any thoughts, Martin, as to whether this MOU approach is going to be used with some of our wider arts institutions?
So we used to have an MOU with the SUTA. And that was at the time was felt wasn't an MOU, wasn't officially an MOU. It had more to it than just being a way of working. So it was we went into the SOI process was deemed appropriate for that relationship rather than an MOU. We don't have any other MOUs with any of our CCOs or COs. We do have an MOU with the Brook Waimea Brook Sanctuary. But there aren't any others with the council organisations.
Councillor Brand.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I know through all the work and the relationship building that happened with the Nothing School of Music Trust, and it was at their request that we did the MOU and the SOI. I just want to clarify, because one of my concerns was it was going to become onerous on them. And we've received that from them. And I just sort of thinking there in 5.4 when it talked about the statement of intent, and that I just wanted to ensure how they've been finding that process, because we were all a bit worried that it become quite onerous and a distraction from what they were doing within our community. And if we needed to peel it back a little bit, or they're quite happy with that, the level of where it sits.
The feedback I've had is that they're very comfortable with the process, and they're also very keen to see the MOU. It's been a while in its making, and they're keen to actually see it being signed. So no, it's been good.
On that, Councillor Brand, would you be prepared to move the resolutions?
Yeah.
Councillor Courtney is happy to second. Any debate? Councillor Sansom.
Yeah, again, just massive thanks to the staff for their work on this. I know that it's been also a long time coming, and I feel like it's good for both NCMA and also for council, and just want to acknowledge staff's support of this and their work on it. So thanks.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just briefly on the elements of the He Tātai Whetū strategy that's present in the MOU. I just want to recognise as part of that strategy, a really key goal was having our various institutions and arts organisations take ownership of that. And I think that this is a really great step in that process, and it's good to see that strategy being embedded and embodied more and more by both our existing organisations, but also our new and emerging ones. So great to see that. Thank you to the staff for continuing to progress that, and to all of the councillors who contributed to bring that strategy into fruition.
Councillor Bench.
I really have a question. On 139, it says that we will provide reliable operational funding. Is that forever? Is that how this works with an organisation like this?
Martin, it's late in the day. Sorry to draw you back, but I wanted to take as relaxed approach as possible. So how long, the only thing I felt when I read reliable level of funding, reliable operational funding, is it a little bit how long is a piece of string?
I guess it's all around the intention, and that's in terms of the MOU. That is the purpose of an MOU, is to provide an intention. If things do change and circumstances change, then that's a conversation that we would have with the MOU, with NCMA. But the intention within the MOU is to work together to deliver on the number of things that are included in the MOU. And one of those is to provide a grant, an annual grant.
So is there never an expectation that a place like this would stand on its own 2 feet? That's really what I'm asking.
There's been no signal to that. I mean, we're in a situation where we've been providing a grant to the NCMA for a number of years, and as far as we're concerned, that won't change in the near future. But obviously, that's a decision for council to make. But there's been no discussion around NCMA standing on its own. They would love to, if they were in a position where they didn't have to come to council and get funding. That would be awesome. That would be a really good position to be in. But right now, that isn't the case.
No, I can accept it's not the case. I mean, this can't be the only organisation like that. And I was just wondering whether There is an expectation, or not. Is this something that all councils always fund?
The only thing when I thought about it and I read the clauses, Martin, is that it's got a terminate clause in it. So either party can terminate it every 6 months. Would it be appropriate to have within it a review that once a decade, and these institutions need security, but it would sort of seem to me, rather than just have the very harsh edge of a termination clause, whether Councillor Benge's question of, well, this is forever, whether a review clause at something like a 10-year mark to give security would be appropriate. Any thoughts?
I think that would be acceptable. Yeah, I think it would be a good thing to do, and it could be included in the MOU. Yeah.
I've gone off script, so I've got I'm now in trouble with Nikki. See the trouble you cause, Councillor?
Yeah, I know it follows me.
Yes.
They need a yak.
Through you, Mayor Nick, my colleague Ms Harrison has just reminded us that in the definitions there is actually a review definition there. So it's a review every 3 years.
Every three.
And I think you would conclude from that refers to something that's in the body of the MOU.
Yeah. Good as gold. I'm covered. We're back in debate mode. Sorry we've gone off script. That's what happens when you've still got council meeting at 4:15. Just in terms of my own contribution, I don't think Nelson completely appreciates the degree how lucky we are with some of these key institutions. And whether it be the Theatre Royal, whether it be the Nelson School of Music Trust, whether it be our Suter Art Gallery, whether it be our Museum Trust, all of which have a huge volunteer effort. I know there will always be a tension in terms of the level of financial support that is provided by the ratepayer. One of the most stark things for me at the beginning of the year in meeting with cities of equivalent size to Nelson and these other institutions is that I came home thinking that we were very fortunate. And what I like about the MOU is putting some formality about maintaining a good relationship with a pretty treasured organisation in Nelson. Any further contributions? That being the case, I shall put the resolutions 1 to 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. Done. Item number 13 we come to, and I invite Alish before council. Can I indicate to councillors that when this item came up at the workshop, there was a pretty even balanced view. And so unless I think there's a change in that, unless people have changed their minds about that, my intention was to allow questions and to tease out the issues from our officers, then to allow what I call a vote in principle on option 1 or 2, and then allow people to be able to express support for either one of those, ask the officers to cast a vote on that basis, and then after we've had the vote in principle, proceed from there. So that's just to give council notice of the way in which I was going to handle the agenda item. Over in your good hands.
Kia ora koutou. I know it's been a long day, so I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
I just had a simple question that came up during the course of the workshop, and that was in terms of both staff time and other resources, if we opt to trigger the process of doing a review of our gambling venue policy, what is the estimated cost to the ratepayer of doing that review?
So through the chair, it's estimated to be about 18,000 to undertake that special consultative procedure.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Campbell, Rollo?
Thanks, man. A quick question on that is, excuse me, if we go with option 2 here, and we go through a consultative process and the like, can we revert back to option 1, or do we then have to change the rules, I guess, once we've done that process?
So through the chair, the special consultative procedure will allow for the public to to be consulted on what we put in that proposal, but ultimately council can decide following that to retain the policy unchanged.
Can I just check in terms of page 148 of the agenda? You report on the pre-engagement process where there was a clear majority of 21 in favour of retaining the policy, 4 for loosening it and 7 for tightening it. How representative is that sort of 32 people that were engaged with in the pre-engagement? It's not a criticism, it's just wanting to understand how much weight do I put on that in the consideration?
So through the chair, the pre-engagement was undertaken with interested parties, so the corporate societies, venue operators, but also the public health providers, as well as people who have been shown an interest in the policy in the past. So it does give that kind of broad range of views, but of course it was only a selected group of people.
And if I could just add through the chair that some of the people or organisations that were contacted by staff then took the opportunity to tell others about this, and they sent in their views unsolicited but very welcome. So I wouldn't say that you could say this was representative of a wider community view.
It's representative of those with a direct interest. Would be a fair description. I.e., you've got the institutions that are there, you've got organisations that work in the harm of gambling space, and so they're representative to that extent. It's very helpful. Any other questions? That being the case, colleagues comfortable with my proposal, and that is that we allow a debate in principle with people effectively not having a mover and seconder, just having people express a view with the normal standing orders of the time, and then at the end of that casting a vote either for option 1 or for option 2, and then following on that. Is there any objection to me following that course of action? That being the case, the floor is open for those that wish to vote for option 1 or 2. I'm happy to set the ball rolling. There's always a balance around gambling policies about being open about harm and the issue of the significant fundraising, which is for our community quite substantial, millions of dollars for many community organisations that do good. And so there are a range of valid opinions. The legislation framework within which we work is actually very restrictive. That is, the decisions that we've got to make are very, very narrow. And the reason that I favour sticking with the current policy is because in practice, I think it'll be no different from what would occur if you went down the road of a sinking lid, of which some people favour. That is, that the current policy is so restrictive around any new licences that over the period that it has been in place since 2018, it has resulted in a consistent decline and that we've had no new licenses issued. If I saw a jump up in the number of gambling venues, then the council is free at any time to be able to trigger a review. And so there are lots of issues before this council of which I want Nigel, Alec and his staff spending time on, of which I think there is the capacity to get really good community outcomes. And while this is one of those issues where it's not very tidy, it doesn't explicitly say that it's a sinking lid, but the way the policy is working in practice is that. And so I don't hold the view strongly. And if there's a majority decision that wants to proceed with a special consultative procedure around making changes to the policy, I'm not going to be strongly opposed to that. But if I look over the period of time and what would be gained, I don't think the outcome is going to be any different to what the current policy is. And I'm always in favour of focusing on outcomes rather than necessarily being too focused on how we get there. And they are the reasons why that I favour the option of the status quo. Deputy Mayor.
We can be sort of yin and yang on this. My view is, and returning councillors will not be surprised by this, is that we do need to adopt a sinking lid. When we looked at this in 2021, I went through and looking through our current restrictions going, right, where could new venues open? And the fact is new venues can open and there were places in which they could open. I do agree somewhat that the existing rules are restrictive and thus far have consistently led to decline. But actually, this is the time that I'm sitting around this table, and my view is that there should be a sinking lid. And if I leave this at the end of this term, and there's not one, and new venues open, I will have to hold that on my conscience. And when I look at the harms of problem gambling, and particularly associated with pokie machines that are deliberately addictive, that do massive harm, then I just think we actually need to act whilst we've got the opportunity to do so. And one of the lines that was used when we looked at it in 2021 was, well, this is only 3 years in. Normally we do a larger review in 6 years. We're now at the 6-year review, and the suggestion is, oh, we'll leave it. Maybe we'll do it in 9 years. The opportunity is here, and I'm not surprised when I look at the feedback and where that sort of pre-engagement has landed. I think the one thing that isn't discussed or touched on in the report that is also really crucial to understanding the harm of problem gambling, and particularly of the pokie machines, is actually about the wealth transfer that occurs. Because we know from research where that money is coming from, which is most commonly our lowest income households. And we know that actually in terms of where that money or the proceeds that are collected as charities funding, where that money ends up being spent is usually not in the same communities that it's coming from. We are transferring wealth from our poorest communities and putting it elsewhere. And if we can play a role in reducing that and reducing harm in our community, I think we have a moral obligation to do so whilst we know that we can.
Councillor Sansom.
I was probably along the lines of you, Mayor Nick. I would love to see a sinking lid policy, but wasn't sure that it was really appropriate to kind of take up staff time and that kind of thing. But I have to say, Deputy Mayor Rohan O'Neill-Stevens is wonderfully eloquent and compelling. And I totally agree with you, Rohan. We're around the table now. If we are not here next term, it's on our conscience. So I'm with Rohan. I support his position, and I'm happy to support option 2 if that's what Rohan thinks we should be doing.
Councillor Benge.
Thank you. I hate gambling. It traps people and it gets them into a spiral, and the gambler is the only one that loses. So the spiral is downward and it is insidious. However, you can gamble online, and if you go to a casino or somewhere else, at least you have to get dressed, maybe catch a bus and go out and maybe talk to other people. This will not stop, in my opinion, the people who have a problem with addiction to this sort of thing. And I'd rather they went downtown, sat in a bar or sat in a casino or somewhere, than sit in a dark room, maybe naked, maybe not, pushing a button until all their money was gone. I think that's a much more insidious and dangerous human activity. And as much as I dislike gambling, I wouldn't like to see it eliminated from being able to be done in public, which is very different to doing it sitting at home. in a flat or sitting in your bedroom. So that's not for us to do that. We don't have the ability to do that. I would love to see online gambling banned. I don't know whether it's a possibility, but just yet, I don't want to see the policy changed.
Councillor Stella, then I'll come to Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, just some thoughts. Of course, we are not seeking to cancel any licenses or stop gaming and so on. Gaming machines do more harm than all other forms of gambling combined, online casinos and so on. We do have scope under our rules for 27 new gaming machines, so I'm with Councillor Sanson and the Deputy Mayor on this one. I think we lock in our gains. We don't know when the situation changes in the city or surrounds, when it becomes easier for a new, facility to have game, and then they get snapped up and so on. It is a community issue, so the pre-engagement is good, but 19 of the 21 who wanted it kept it as are receiving money from the system. I tried to dig into what it looks like when you take $10 million from this community each year. Where's that coming from? And we know obviously it's in lower socioeconomic areas, but nationwide surveys suggest 10% of adults play a gaming machine once in the past 12 months. And Nelson, if we say take 55,000 people, 75% of those adults, 10% of those people, it's 4,100 people, they're losing on average $2,500 a year. If we say half those people are just visited gaming once or twice, and therefore the other half were more hardcore and the other ones losing money, that's 2,000 people losing $5,000 a year in our community. 2,000 people losing $5,000 a year each to make up that 10 million. In these cases, sometimes I do we thought experiment when I think, okay, what do we think about this? And because it's similar with alcohol advertising, I think like there's been goodwill and so on generated and normalization. Imagine if this activity didn't exist at all and someone came in here today and said, hey, I've got a good way to raise $4 million for sports clubs. We're going to put purposefully addictive gaming machines in low socioeconomic areas with pretty significant harm. 2,000 people in our community are going to lose $5,000 a year each. $6 million is going to go nowhere, and the $4 million is going to go to the sports clubs. How about that? And I think I'd say, well, that's really inefficient. It's harmful and probably immoral. There must be a better way of getting that $4 million to the sports clubs and the charities and so on. So, but we're not discussing, ultimately whether it should exist or not. But I think we should lock in the gains if, these facilities or pubs no longer have the gaming machines. We should have a sinking lid policy, considering the harm that it does in our community.
I think I indicated Councillor Rollo, and following Councillor Rollo will be Councillor Pakipaki.
Thanks, Nick. I'll keep it brief. I'm supportive of option one, keeping the status quo. I think if you look at where we've got to since the last time it was updated, there's in fact been a drop of gambling machines. There's been no new licensees apply to be one. And I think if I was to see any change, if you look at the policy, there's a purple mesh mat over the zones where we can't currently allow them. Ironically, there's licensed venues inside of that. I would simply look to see that purple zone expanded out into some of those areas where we don't want them. But at the moment, I'm happy with option one.
Councillor Pakipaki.
God, sorry about that. I used to work as a probation officer for the Department of Corrections, doing criminogenic assessments for pre-sentence reports. Part of that assessment was doing DAST reports, but also making a connection between the offending behaviour, the criminogenics of the situation that people were in, and one of those measures was to cut to the short of it, it's basically there's a correlation, a direct correlation between offending behaviour and the crime that's associated with gambling. Gambling is under the Mental Health Act. It is a recognised addiction. It is when we talk about the costs. Aaron clearly laid out a really cool thing about money, but the costs are domestic violence, parents without their kids. The issues of the police resources having to be taken up in investigating crimes related to burglaries and domestic violence and all of these negative outcomes for our community. There was a huge campaign in the 1980s when the Lotteries Commission was sort of established, and this is part of the studies that I did, where they did an active role to entrench the funding model within essential community services to basically make us as a community addicted, because the justification is our kids, our sport, our communities need this income, this money. Will become dependent, just like the gambling addiction. So there is no positive outcomes from gambling. Yes, it is a personal choice, but it's been shown in studies and proven scientifically that gambling is a mental health problem. And if we're going to say we're going to allow that, like Aaron said, that here's an option for us to have that within our community. The online gambling, as Councillor Benge pointed out, is a problem. But you rely on a credit card, and all of the cases that I dealt with, most of them had exhausted their ability to be able to even hold a credit card because they were unable to pay it back. So that there's a little bit of a red herring for that, and it's another problem. Online gambling, but it's separate to what we're talking about here. So providing venues and making that the social norm, and making the social norm justified by the benefits that our community have become addicted to. Don't just justify us going with option one. I'm going to say option two, because we need a pot. We need a pot.
Sinking.
No, we need a sinking lid. I'm so close. I nearly had that one too. Okay. The sinking lid, where it is a blight on our community. It always has been. I accept that. I mean, as a sports advocate, I know that it does a lot of good, but I've seen the other side. It does so much more harm. It really hurts our families. So, if we can do something to start taking that choice from people who aren't able to make those good choices away from, that's a hard decision that we're going to have to make. So I'm going to go with option two. Go.
Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, I have to remind myself, I think at first I look at this in isolation, I think, well, option two seems like the right way to go for me. When I look at how the current policy is functioning, and I think about the overall priorities of council, of our workload, I actually think maybe now's not the right time. There will be a right time in the future, but for now I'd be supporting option one.
Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson got my eye first.
Yeah. I'm erring towards option two, and you might be right. Option one might be doing just as good a job, but I don't know for a fact. A lot of people I know that don't have any money gamble a lot, and it sucks. And the RSC, that's just been brought up with me recently. There's some issues around RSC workers spending their no money on gambling as well, and actually been taken advantage of. So yeah, I'm a hypocrite. I use sometimes we use lotteries where it's convenient. So I'm involved in groups where we can say no and take the moral high ground, and I'm also involved with other organisations where we do take advantage of the lotteries grant.
And Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through them. Yeah. Everyone's made valid points, and I think we all want to achieve the same thing, because gambling, there is a cost to the society, whether it's the immediate person themselves directly being the victim, or their immediate family or extension of that. But there's also the unseen victims that come through due to white collar crime and stuff like that, and we see that a lot in our justice system. It is a mental health, it is an addiction, and it is something that there's now starting to come out research from the National Library of Medicine that have shown from 2023 that the difference between gaming machines in public versus online gaming, and some of those things, I sort of get where you're going about it being a red herring in this situation, but I actually don't think it is, because the venues can be seen to be a place of social activity, whereas an online is basically can lead to people being in solidarity and being on their own, and then becoming very isolated and unseen to the wider community that this person may be struggling and may need help. A venue offers open and close times, whereas online gaming doesn't. It's 24/7, and therefore the risk of gambling longer and creating the roll-on effect that goes through different stuff. So when I look at what this current policy offers around venues and the establishment, and that cannot be on land zoned within, and then you look at the maps and you can see that's pretty restrictive. It's not completely wiped out, but it's pretty restrictive. The fact that they cannot relocate during times that the buildings that they would need to earthquake strengthen, they would have to apply for a new license, and going through the process of a new license isn't exactly straightforward and easy. They have to jump through a number of hoops. The cap on naming on machine numbers and stuff like that within the Nelson region, in some ways by default, this current policy is a sinking lid by default. It doesn't say sinking lid, but there is pretty enough a lot of restrictions in there that could wind it down and set it to. And the number of applications that we have seen for new venues or machines that pop up in recent times, it's not a level of comfort, because it is a problem for society, and it's not something that can be ignored or should walk away from. But when we put it in this context, I sort of feel that we have got enough restrictions under the current policy without having to go at this time to add in the words of sinking lid. And I sort of do come back to the comment that was made by Councillor Maddie about that by default we've got sports groups, social service providers and other NGO and health providers that also apply for funding, as well as kindies, preschools and others that do apply for the lottery's funding grant through different mechanisms to help them cover their basic service costs they can deliver a service to those that may actually be the person who is putting their money into that machine for them to come back around in the cycle. But I also know how difficult it is and the tough decision that those organisations make, and they tend to exhaust all other options first before they go down the lottery grant application process, because they feel that they are being hypocrites of having to provide a service that is actually for those people who have been harmed through gambling and other forms of addictions. So I'm going to support option one, because I don't think it is the time to go out and relook at that. Plus, we are on a tight budget, and I feel that the current policy, like I said, by default is a sinking lid, and therefore I don't need to spend that money for consultation.
Thank you. Are there any other contributions? I'm sorry, Councillor Courtney.
Things are pretty constant, when you look at the report 5.3, the numbers of venues have stayed consistent at 9 between 2021 and 2024. So it's not as if it's rocketing ahead, is it? Does it? And it dropped again. Yeah. So no, I don't think we have an issue here, quite frankly. I think we've got it under control, and I think doesn't have any growth in it at all, quite frankly. If you look at the figures, I can't see a growth there. So I don't think there's room for us to get concerned at this stage. It's static or declining.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. I'm going to call the Chief Executive to ask for a vote. I'd ask each elected member to either say option one or option two, and then on the basis of that, I'll bring a resolution through with the instructions for staff to progress from there.
Councillor Anderson?
Option two.
Councillor Bench?
Option one.
Councillor Brand.
Option 1.
Councillor Courtney.
Option 1.
Councillor Hodgson.
Option 1.
Councillor Pakipaki.
Option 2.
Councillor Brainy is absent. Councillor Rollo.
Option 1.
Councillor Sampson.
Option 2.
Councillor Skinner is an apology. Councillor Stallard.
Option 2, please.
Deputy Mayor O'Neill Stevens.
Option 2.
His worship the Mayor.
Option 1.
6 5. 6 to 5.
So it's 65, option 1.
I'll then move from the chair the option 1 as the thank you, Councillor Brand. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, say no. Decision made. Now we come to the issue of the infrastructure activity management plans. And given I'm sorry. We have the issue of the standing orders. 2 items to go. I'm getting ahead of myself. Pages 161 to 170. Thank you, Robin. Floor is yours. Happy for you to give a brief summary of the report between yourself and Nikki. Take any questions and then we'll move forward as quickly as possible.
Sure. Thank you. I'll take the report as read, but essentially from the 1st of October that the current legislation that allows for people joining the meeting through Zoom to count towards quorum, that is withdrawn. So to allow for council to continue to have that opportunity, we just need to include this in our standing orders. And that is essentially what the report is about. There's been a slight suggested change to some of the clauses to allow for that. And we've clarified in clause 13.12 just a little bit of information with regards to how to apply. So we've included to send an email, do it in writing. You can do that on a messaging as well. And also, as worship the Mayor suggested, we also include the reference to the chairperson not unreasonably withholding approval of that request.
Can I just check, when we say in our standing orders, a request in writing, that there's a definition somewhere that says that an email is defined as being in writing?
Yes, it's not in standing orders, but I believe it's in
statutes interpretations.
Yes,
okay.
Something like that. But you know, in writing is via email, handwriting, messaging.
And I'm assuming if we don't do what you tell us to, sorry, don't get that quite wording right. If we don't do this on the 1st of October, the change in the legislation catches us and means that people who are approved on Zoom are not counted within the quorum.
That's right. We revert back to what we were previously. So the Local Government Electoral Legislation Act in 2023, they amended the Local Government Act schedule to allow for people on video to account towards quorum as long as it is in your standing orders.
Looks fine to me. Unless there's debate, I'm happy to move. And seconded by Councillor Pakipaki. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
I just wanted a quick clarification, very brief, through the chair. But the priority would still be if able to be in person. This is the exception when that is beyond being able to be here in person. It's not going to be a given, so that it's a mixed hybrid meeting.
No, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are, the chairperson needs to give approval, and if you are sick, if you are out of town, if you have an emergency, they are the general examples of when a chairperson would give approval.
What was the wording you used before? I think me and Nick used it earlier on today. Unreasonable something?
Oh, yeah, that the chairperson would not be able to unreasonably decline.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. Carried. And that was one I do think we needed a 75% to change St Horners, do we not?
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct. It was unanimous, so we don't have a problem there. Let's have Phil, Lyndon, Mark, in with respect to your infrastructure activity management plans at 10 minutes to 5.
No trouble. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report just simply seeks to have our final versions of our activity management plans adopted. I'm happy that the report stands on its own, and I'm just happy to answer any questions.
The key question I had as I searched through the docs is that we spent an enormous amount of time when we put the long-term plan together in querying you around getting that balance right. And it's a very topical issue, particularly in terms of water, that we're spending enough for the replacements. Through that long-term process, we became pretty comfortable, and you very succinctly answered a number of questions. Am I fair to assume that these activity management plans are effectively the legal document that give the detail to the decisions we made through that process?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, they are the supporting documents for your decision making.
And the second question I had was these plans, there's a 30-year and a 10-year. Now, the 10-year process went through all the long-term plan process. Do we have activity management plans for that sort of year 2034 through to 54?
We have infrastructure strategy, which looks at a very high level for each of the activity management plans.
So the law only requires the strategy to cover the 30 years, and we're required to have these plans for this period.
Yes, that's correct.
And the 30-year infrastructure plan was part of the LTP.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry. Good. I've got my different dots in a row. Are there questions from colleagues? Councillor Anderson.
So I can't find the page, but there's a table with risk assessment and something about one of the risks being likely was councillors, pet projects. I'm happy to listen and keep my mouth shut, but it would be good to know what that is and how can we change that risk from likely to something a bit lower, because us being a likely risk is not something I think we really want from our elected representatives.
Phil, do you want to give us some pearls of wisdom on the risks that are posed by your mayor and councillors?
Mr. Mayor, we do not see councillors as a risk to us, but we are aware that every 3 years when we do the LTP, new projects can pop up, and they demand scrutiny, and they demand some effort, and they can take some money. We recognise the risk to our utilities from other activities and the demands that might come from many areas. So we just put it in our risk management register, and we manage it comfortably through the long-term plan process. It'll never get out of hand.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Nick. Phil, with all the material in here, just for our benefit, what we might keep in mind, are there any small number of really clear or deepest challenges that we face in terms of, this activity management plan, the biggest sort of issues that might be likely to pop up over the next few years or even 10 years?
The obvious ones, Mr. Mayor, really just simply affordability, just the increase in costs of the construction that we face. And that's happening at exactly the same time as our assets are ageing, so that we just have a greater demand for money and cash to actually start renewing our assets. I think for me, that is the most critical one. Growth, I think we can cope with quite comfortably. Even the legislation changes and things that we're facing, the things that we just deal with. But affordability is really number one for me.
Any other queries? That being the case, I will move from the chair the adoption of the infrastructure activity management plans covered in resolutions 1, 2 and 3. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Brand. That is now open for debate. As chair, I'd just simply say that these activities are huge. These are hundreds of millions of dollars of work. And while we're taking it in quite a shortened time at the end of our council meeting, it is actually one of the biggest set of risks and services that we do. And the shortness with which council is given today is more a product of the level of confidence that we have in our council staff, of which I was particularly impressed with during the long-term plan. As we poked and we prodded and we tested, I came away with a high level of confidence in their work. And the last point I was made is the more I have scrutinised since becoming mayor, the comparative state, particularly of our water infrastructure, this council owes a huge debt both to our council staff over a long period of time, but also to the people who sat in these seats in previous years who made good decisions that mean that this council can have a high level of confidence in its water. When I have my regular gatherings with mayors from other parts of the country, so many of them are sweating and under pressure around these very issues that are in such good shape in the city. And that should be acknowledged as we adopt these activity management plans. That being the case, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. That is carried. Again, can I acknowledge all of our councillors for what has been a long council meeting with some very significant items. And I would ask Councillor Pakipaki on a very significant day for Māoridom, but also a significant day for this council with respect to the Māori ward, to close this with karakia.
Ai ka pai. Tēnā koutou, maha ngā me nui, ka koutou. Ka tangi au he karakia whakakape o te rā nei, rā nui. Te akina te rangi, te akina te hau, te akina te awa, te akina te maunga, te akina te moana, te akina te whai o te ao, te akina papa atuanuku, e tuturu whakamaua kia tīna. Tīna. Au me hui e.
Tai e kia.
Kia ora mai tātou. Koati. Oh, thank you. Tough.
Yeah.
Bloody one of those blubber mouth, I mean, soupy bubba moments. Yeah. I know. I'm just acknowledging for what it is.